Today, I'm honoured to talk with Elizabeth Lewis-Gray about CEEC's 10 years, which is an exciting milestone, and her vision of the mining industry, the opportunities, the challenges, and the drivers of change for the future. So a little bit about Elizabeth's background. She's one of industry's most respected leaders and change agents. In 2014, the Canadian Institute of Mining described her as one of 12 people to know, one of the characters whose energy, imagination and impact are catalysts for change. Elizabeth is the co-founder, managing director and now chairman of Gekko Systems, roles that she's held for over 25 years, and she's also chair of Gekko Medical and chair of Gaia Envirotech. And she's played pivotal roles across industry, such as a member of the Australian Gold Council, chair of Austmine, a member of Innovation Australia's board, and founding chair of Mets Ignited. And in the last 3 years, she's also joined Kirkland Lake Gold as an independent director and has many, many awards, a long list of awards, including an honorary doctorate from Federation University. So, Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. The main subject of today's conversation is around CEEC, and it began only because of your role in initiating it, informing the idea of and establishing CEEC as a not-for-profit collective as founding chair. In the last 10 years, we've seen a lot of change. CEEC is stronger than ever as a testament to you and how you assembled like-minded founding directors, leaders and sponsor support and formed its vision. So tell us a little bit about the beginnings of CEEC, its history back from 2010 till now.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you for talking to me about this. It's something of great pride for me that CEEC is now 10 years old, and what you have achieved and what the organisation has achieved has just been, probably beyond what we ever imagined, or what we'd hoped for in the beginning. So, this is a pretty exciting time for me, and the way that CEEC, or the Coalition for Eco-Efficient Comminution, came about was that, we discovered amongst our clients at Gekko Systems, we were very much pushing for a low energy, low footprint attitude towards mineral processing. And we discovered when we talked to quite a lot of our clients that even despite the test work that was done in the lab, indicating that they could install smaller plants, do more pre-concentration, reduce their comminution, reduce the size of their plant, sometimes up to a factor of 3 times, they were still taking a much more cautious approach, which was we need to grind the material to 70 microns, or 105 microns for us to really maximise the recovery of the mineral. And it wasn't really just the recovery. They weren't sort of looking at, we were generally talking to technical people or technical consultants, and they weren't looking at the economic return often for the project. They were looking at the return of the mineral. And I remember having one particularly frustrated conversation with some of our technical team and saying, look, this is crazy, because they could build the plant for 1/3 of the size and get just much higher return. And it's so much better for the environment, and when you look at the exponential impact of grind size, the finer you grind, the amount of energy that you use is exponentially higher. Which said, this is crazy. It's not working for the environment and it's not working financially. And I also said to the team, well, I can solve this problem, because if it's an economic issue, then it's a matter of getting to the C-suite. It's a matter of talking to the people at the top of the decision-making tree, because they will respond to economic issues, whereas perhaps the more technical people in an organisation will not. So so that was pretty good. So I rang the first person, and we knew that the JKMRC in Brisbane did a lot of research into comminution and the impact of comminution. So I thought, well, this is easy. I'll ring one of my heroes, Professor Tim Napier-Munn, who's a legend, and say, how did we solve this, Tim? This is crazy. So I rang him up to have a chat to him about it, and he said, it is crazy. And he said also, what's more is the research we've shown is that 5 to 9% of Australia's electricity consumption is utilised by crushing and grinding. So I just thought, well, this is insanity. Not only are people making, and I think difficult decisions about how much they invest in their plant, but they're also using this incredible amount of energy, and that's something that we really need to do something about. So I ended up flying up to Brisbane, where I met with Tim Napier-Munn, and then I also went and met with Malcolm Powell and Rob Morrison at the JKMRC, and we sort of went through some of the issues that were happening. And there was a lot of research being done into new technologies that were showing how we could minimise our energy in comminution, but a lot of it wasn't getting published because it was being done in research projects. Some of them were Amara projects where the research had to be kept confidential for 2 years before it could be released. And we just really talked about the fact everyone in the industry knew this was an issue, but no one was really in a position to do anything about it. And I suppose my viewpoint this is a communications issue. This is a marketing issue. This is an issue where we're not telling the people who are making decisions about this absolutely critical impact of mining and the opportunity for us to improve it. So that's really the process that happened. That's how we got engaged, I suppose, in the conversation with Tim Napier-Munn, with Rob Morrison and Malcolm Powell. And they also told me about a young lady who'd done a research project on this in her PhD, and that was Jelka Pokrachik. So, I just started ringing everyone that was, who can I ring that can tell me more about this? And so I rang Jelka, who was in Melbourne as well, and then we met up and I talked to her about it. And every time I spoke to somebody, they were just like all agreeing with me. This is ridiculous. We all agree, it's crazy. What do we do about it? And really everyone, I suppose, who came from that research community didn't have a sense of, well, what can we do about it? And I suppose that was my opportunity as a storyteller, to sort of think, well, here's something that really we need to do something about this. This is something that shouldn't be left, undiscussed in the mining sector. And so that was really the impetus for, looking at how can we set up an organisation whose pure role really is to tell the story and to make sure that people were informed when they were making decisions.
Absolutely. And look, it's fantastic to hear how just out of sheer frustration that there was an elephant in the room that everybody knew about, that you really got that energy together to really tackle this. And when I think about that first conversation that you had, which was back in 2010, and then CEEC was formed in 2011, you really collectively put a clear focus on that, really distilled it down to what can we do about this big problem for industry. And just two things come to mind instantly when I think about 10 years to now. One is that you formed a roadmap really early on about how do we tackle this issue? And I'm really interested in that because I think that industry's motivation has really changed now. And it'd be good for us to talk about that in a minute, where C-suite sit now in terms of the ESG imperative, what they're hearing from
fascinating
stakeholders. But also the big part of CEEC was to encourage and share published work, create that awareness, get that knowledge sharing going. And I think testament to that is that one of the 2020 CEEC medal winners was a team from Envirotech with Newmont, who actually looked at alternative comminution and processing routes and put the financials around it, as well as the impact on energy and water. I think this is a really exciting time for industry. Do you want to comment on from 10 years to now and what you see has changed in industry, and perhaps how CEEC has been a part of that focus to help get that discussion going, connecting the technology solutions to the financial case?
Well, I think that was always the point of actually making this a financial decision rather than a technical, well, not rather than a technical one, but one where the financial implications as well as the environmental implications were taken into account. But we felt that it was the financial implications that were really going to talk to the C-suite. and that was where the message needed to be raised, so that the C-suite were asking the right questions of people, so that and then the technical people would then have the opportunity to explain how they were going about it. So look, I mean, I think, from my, watching what CEEC's achieved, and when we first started, of course, one of the things was the CEEC medal, and as you said, the roadmap. And the roadmap very much came out of work by Tim Napier-Munn and Sarah Boko, who was the first executive running the organisation. And, there's no doubt. And Tim Napier-Munn also organised a workshop that we had in Brisbane where people came from all over the world to engage in this topic, from Brazil, from North America, from England, from Europe. It was really quite an extraordinary, and that's testament obviously to Tim's network as well, that he could attract all those people, and that helped us develop the roadmap as well. So building the roadmap and, I think running the CEEC medal, which had very much a focus on looking at both economic and the technical background was really, and environmental was really important. But what I've seen emerge in the development of CEEC, and this is what's always exciting about what you envisage versus what actually happens. And, what's great is when what happens is greater and better and sort of more exciting than what you envisaged, because I suppose originally my thinking was it's storytelling, it's marketing, it's, making sure that these papers, technical papers that have been written actually are published. And not only are they published, but people can find them easily. That was one of our really important areas of focus. But what the organisation's gone on to do, which I think is so exciting, is the benchmarking of data and allowing companies to compare their performance and to see how other groups are responding to the requirement for lower energy and how other groups are performing, whether it's per tonne or per gram or whatever that measure is, to actually rate themselves, because we know as storytellers and people with a behavioural focus is that peer pressure is always the most effective way of accelerating change, above everything. So I think for me that's been one of the most exciting programs that yourself, Alison, and the CEEC team and the CEEC board have been able to achieve.
Well, that's wonderful, and I certainly can't take too much credit for that because it actually did occur before I came on board, and that's a testament once again to an industry workshop and some really innovative minds who wanted to solve this problem. I'm pretty sure Malcolm Powell and Grant Ballantyne were really pivotal in that, as well as Tim Napier-Munn, but also industry at that workshop explaining what they needed and what would be useful, and then transforming that into a really visual, simple tool that could be assembled by industry. And thanks to the amazing vision of the industry sponsors of not only CEEC, but also the sponsoring groups behind that original suite of energy curves, and then the subsequent funding from the Queensland Government and Mets Ignited, completely independently, successfully won, that enabled us to create the advanced energy curves. I'm really excited about where we can go with that. I think, we've had a bit of a pause in the pandemic, but I think that we can rejuvenate those types of benchmarking tools to really be a collective to tackle some of the big ESG issues, some of the net zero commitments that companies are making. It's not a big step to take those energy curves to emissions curves, and we've already run a workshop on initiating a completely new and unique suite of water curves. There's a lot of strong interest from industry to tackle the water issue of the footprint side, to create eco-efficient minerals. We've got some big challenges, Elizabeth, but some fantastic opportunities, I think.
I think addressing the water curve is a really fantastic area to focus on. And it really, the whole thing for me, in terms of, what CEEC is, I don't really see too many other parallel organisations in mining, organisations that exist purely to improve the outcomes for mining, overall, for the benefit of everyone, whether it be the environment, the industry, the mining supply companies or the mining companies. It's a very unique structure. And, in the early days, we really wanted to get 15 sponsors, I suppose. And 15 sponsors for us meant an annual income, of roughly $150,000. And we thought if we really watched our pennies and that we could just really spend our time selling the message and putting somebody on full time to do it. But now I think, how many members have you got now?
We've got 25 and growing now, and they're also now paying US $10,000 a year, which is really helpful because it's helping put a little bit more money in our kitty so that we can not just do that marketing, but actually really get good traction on collaborative conversations.
Exactly, and start doing this. I mean, I think it would be fair to say that I probably spent about 30% of my time on CEEC. It was certainly a massive. It actually, it was quite time consuming, as anything is, as any startup. When you're setting the vision and you're bringing people on the journey, it's incredibly time consuming. And I was really assisted by a range of people who helped out and who sat, and I think I sent to you before the minutes from our founding meeting on the 7th of September 2010, where Gekko, Sustainable Metals Institute and Amira all funded $10,000 each to actually put together the materials and to sort of fund the startup so that we could start attracting sponsors. So that was a little $30,000 we had to begin with. But at that original meeting, we had Chris Moran from the Sustainable Mineral Institute, Jelka Prokopchik, Mike Daniels, who did an amazing job helping us collect. He was also a PhD student who'd come out of JK MRC, and he helped us collect a whole bunch of the papers. Tim Napier-Munn, Wayne Stanger from Amira, and Sandy Gray, who's my partner at Gekko Systems. So it's really interesting to go back and look at those original minutes and just to see the passion and also, I suppose, the courage of people to step up and say, yep, I'm prepared to be part of this. And really people did put a lot of time and effort into getting it started.
And an enormous thanks to you, Elizabeth, to all of those founding directors and supporters and those founding sponsors, because CEEC wouldn't be here today. So huge thanks. I'm really interested because obviously that started mostly from people within Australia, and it did take some time, I think, to establish trust of what CEEC was about and establish that it actually was a global initiative, not something just coming out of Australia or the JK. What do you think was key to establishing and gaining trust of CEEC's mission and actions by industry through the volunteers, the sponsors, the organisations that got involved? Have you got any comment on that?
Look, I think this is a topic, as I said before, that every time you spoke to somebody, they said, we have to do something about it. It was on the people's to-do list. They just didn't know what to do about it. Pretty early on, a list of, we wouldn't call them associates, ambassadors. So, whenever I went to a conference or whenever one of the other board members went to a conference or spoke to somebody, or when I was, travelling around the world, we would go and see people and just tell them the story and ask them to be sponsors. And if they weren't prepared to be sponsors, we asked them to be ambassadors. Everyone was passionate about it. So it was pretty easy. I didn't want it to be Australian only because it's an international issue. And, of course, we worked out pretty early on that the areas that we really needed to focus on to start with in comminution were copper and gold, because that's where the minerals tend to be more finely ground. So we focused pretty closely on those areas, and then we worked out which parts of the world they were, the largest producers, I suppose, and then we focused on those parts of the world as well and found people and spoke to people in those regions. And, of course, as we expanded the board, we purposely looked to bring more and more international people on the board as well. So we had, Australia's always had good connections with Canada, USA, South America, England, South Africa. So we just, really used our connections to keep on furthering and worked out which were the segments, the market segments where people really were expending the most energy and needed to, in comminution, and needed to address it. And obviously there were, people like Owen Hegarty who came on board very early on as a patron, and that always makes a big difference when you've got, quite a big name. We spoke to Nick Holland at Goldfields, who was CEO of Goldfields, and he came on as a patron, and we just kept on working as much as we could to bring international. We didn't want people to think it was just an Australian-only program.
Yep. So it's too important not to collaborate. There's a fantastic quote from our recent interview with Dean Gehring, Newmont Executive Vice President, and he said, "Alison, this is just simply too important not to collaborate." I think that's absolutely resonates with all of this.
Great quote.
With all of the collaborators in the network. And yes, you're right, it's unique. And it's not only unique because it's international and it's an altruistic mission that's practical, but it also involves miners, mets and researchers. Just touching on your copper gold focus, one of the things I want to mention is that the energy curves a few years ago achieved a fantastic milestone, which was that the energy curves, and this is quite a targeted, conscious decision to do this, that the energy curves reached over 60% of global copper mines informing the energy curves and over 30% of global gold.
Incredible.
Yep, it is incredible. And I think that that's still growing. In terms of the international thing, one thing that perhaps people don't know is that 2/3 of our board is actually outside of Australia and 1/3 of our staff are outside of Australia. So we're
fantastic.
Very much an international network. And
yeah,
we've
it's
seen
brilliant.
medal winners from around the world, which is terrific. And we've run at least 15 workshops all around the world, Chile, Peru, several in North America, Europe, all around Australia. Where next? It'd be great.
Well, also the other, it's only a small piece, but I notice behind you you've got the infographic, the comminution infographic, and we collaborated with Visual Capitalist. That's one. Yeah, that one. We collaborated with Visual Capitalist, who are a Vancouver-based group, to actually put that together and to try, because there are so many points in this discussion, because not only was comminution representing 3% of global electricity consumption, only 5% of all the energy consumed in a ball mill went to reduction in particle size. 95% was lost in heat, and that was a lot of the research that Gelk had done. So, there were so many stories to tell. And the other thing, I suppose, that we're always very conscious of was that when you're doing research and lab test work for a mine that's going to be, or a mill that's going to be installed in 6 years' time, I mean, it's another 6 years away. So if you don't get the test work right, if you don't look at what are the real factors that could make this mine low energy consumption, you've got a 6-year tail. You're stuck in the wrong flow sheet. So it really needed to happen quite early that people, were educated on the opportunities.
And I think it's really interesting. In my last role, I worked in a valuation and due diligence role where mining leaders are making those big decisions about, acquisitions and, value uplift. And the MPV model tends to focus very much on the short term. So it's very challenging. I think miners are still grappling with that. It's not just the MPV, but it's also risk, and it's also investor facing and shareholder facing and community facing risks that need to be balanced. So I think we're really at a time of change with that. still it can be very difficult to make those investments in the alternative comminution pathways. But I think that CEEC has played a role in sharing the demonstrated installations and advances. What would you say to that role of CEEC?
Oh, look, I think absolutely. And that's, I suppose, one of the great things about the CEEC medal, as well as it gives a chance to profile those. But again, it comes back to getting the case studies, telling the stories, showing people what's possible, showing them, because it's about fear. You know, it's fear that holds people back from making decisions, and particularly, you know, engineers particularly want facts, you know, and if they don't have them in front of them, the tried and tested route, so we need to be able to put facts. And I just remember one of the great quotes that Rob Morrison said for the first time I went and visited him, and we put it, I think, in, if you don't have to break it, don't break it. And that always has just completely stayed with me. Why got it? Like, so you see all the work that Orica's done with blasting. You know what? You know, if you can reduce the rock in blasting and it's less energy, well, you know, that's a great outcome. It's not about just about comminution, it's about everything around it that reduces the amount of rock that you actually have to put into the comminution circuit, as well as the different methodologies that you might use in breaking it and grinding it.
Yeah, and I think that we've seen some really amazing collective information and collaboration done on a range of fronts now, on blasting, on pre-concentration, on modelling. And we're at a different time in industry now where we have these really powerful big data and artificial intelligence enabling type of software and hardware where we can do digital twins, we can make those decisions more on the fly to really optimise and improve the footprint and the productivity of our plants. Such an exciting time. And I know that CEEC in some of its early infographics and videos was really trying to raise awareness of things like blasting and pre-concentration. And now that's almost becoming mainstream. We're seeing major miners embrace that.
Oh, I know. It's so exciting. And the other thing that's so great, you know, sitting on a board like Kirkland Lake, is how much, you know, environmental factors are driving decision making. So even, you know, bring out that it's reducing energy and it's better for the environment and the footprint of the plant is smaller. I mean, these are all things that it's sort of, you know, I don't really think that we'd understood at the time how much it would play into what the drivers in the industry are now. And that's, you know, that's pretty exciting outcome.
Absolutely. Very exciting. I'm going to completely off script, Elizabeth, but anyway, I want to just raise something. Weir Minerals, one of our valued sponsors, came to us last year and raised the question of what can we do about, you know, how much energy is consumed by mining and comminution and how much water is consumed. And really the figures haven't been updated much since CEEC brought that awareness through some of that early marketing. But they just commissioned and released a new report, an independent report, and that they confirmed that figure is up to 3% when you take into account mining, cement and quarrying. And they focused on 5 key commodities. If I try and list them, I'll forget them. Copper, gold, iron ore, lithium and base metals. I think it was something like that. And really, I think we still have the same issue. Comminution is still essentially a very inefficient process, and we have existing plant that's already been installed that we need to deal with. So putting in place changes in front of that plant, blasting, pre-concentration, data-enabled optimisation, and optimising the way we run those plants by that knowledge sharing is really important. I want to raise that because we still have a really big challenge with industry, and coupled with that, we've just seen the IEA report be released in the last couple of weeks that identifies a huge challenge that the whole of society has in our pathway to net zero. So we have some really big challenges. What do you see is the need to collaborate to really accelerate the solutions on this? We've still got a lot of big challenges, don't we? What are your thoughts about the future?
Well, I think that, from what I can see from the outside looking in, and like when I said I mean ease and decision making, I still think in telling this story, and whilst we know that people are focused on the environment, I don't know how much. You talked about that Gaia from important topic for collaboration. I mean, is that the response we get across all our major miners in gold and copper, where the energy is being spent? I don't know. I don't know whether they've gone back and reevaluated their test programs and reevaluated their flow sheets for new mines to say, actually, we need to do this differently. I think we've still got, I think people, and I still think that they're not, whether or not we cut this out or not, I don't know. But I still believe that the mining companies are still quite cautious in their application of new flow sheets. And you see some of the work that came out of CEEC ore that they did at Minera San Cristobal in Bolivia, which was very, very collaborative amongst the suppliers and the energy efficiency and pre-concentration. I just think we've still got an absolute heap of a way to go. And what we've done, virtually all the plants in gold, fine grind, CIL, I think that there's a long way for us to go, a long way for people to invest in it and prove up new flow sheets.
I think I would agree, but there are always leaders where, like you say, Sumitomo's Minera San Cristobal mine in Bolivia is really thinking differently and really putting in place the test work that needs to be demonstrated to prove that pre-concentration will add value and reduce footprint. And there's also FMG Iron Bridges project. That's one that comes to mind. That's putting in place some lower footprint approaches, and there's many others. There's obviously dry stacked solutions, and such as Carrara Mine, and they're just a few that come to mind off the back. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's happening around the world, and also in parallel with that, because of this huge imperative to reduce our emissions, we're seeing miners embrace renewables and hybrid power supply. I think that's a really exciting area. Do you feel that CEEC needs to be involved in that conversation? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, certainly my view is that CEEC has been sufficiently effective in helping progress responses to comminution that I believe that CEEC can spread its wings into other areas that provide benefits from collaboration and better knowledge sharing in the industry. Obviously, you can't bite off too many topics, but I think that broadening the opportunity to contribute to those discussions is an amazing opportunity for CEEC. And, I think if I had my way, we'd be changing CEEC to something like, collaboration around energy efficiency, and just, really taking on the challenge of discussing how do we improve that, because it is, the industry really has to very much, work from pit to port. We have to break down these silos between mining, metallurgy, geology, data, and so I think the very core focus and try and attract even a larger number of sponsors and more international support and further what is an collaboration for what is a relatively small investment for mining companies and METS companies, and take it the next step further.
On that topic, you're talking, there's some really interesting stuff in that about attracting larger sponsors and more international support for CEEC, because at the moment we have a website that helps us share knowledge, and we have, a lot of communication to focus awareness to why comminution is key, and some of the important things that leaders can focus on, and why there's the what's in it for me for mining companies and METS as to the financial and environmental impact of different decision-making, more informed decision-making. But if we really want to take it to another level, I think what we need is to have those leaders at the table bringing ideas to the table and then saying, let's fund this new thing. Maybe it might be a collaborative project or an expansion of tools or a new suite of forums and roundtables to really target a specific area, such as what part will comminution play in industries and companies' pathways to net zero, for example. So I think that we are limited at the moment by our funding, and it really depends on the energy and enthusiasm, the commitment, and then the funding of those sponsors, and people bringing their ideas and being willing to share them more openly. So what would you say to leaders about why to get involved in CEEC, and what would you suggest they put on the table to really help CEEC channel and support industry to accelerate those changes that we all want to see?
Well, if you're sort of asking me for a strategy to get that support, I suppose, I think first we have to understand that a lot of the boards now in mining industry are not technically skilled, and this is quite a complex area, so it's very hard for them to influence technical decision making because there's just too much risk for them to butt their head in. They can ask the right questions, but can they really, make that change? I think that's quite a complicated question. I mean, for me, I think that, there's a CEEC, badge, a bit like you might get, this, made in Australia, or there's some sort of, I think maybe it would be aligning CEEC with the ICMM or some of those groups who really do have very, very good connections, getting a badge where people, for training their staff, engineering companies are given a badge if their staff attend training to where alternative practices are presented, and where they dedicate their staff to come to a workshop. Perhaps the same. I mean, the thing that I see really makes a difference, and if you look at the Sumitomo San Cristobal example, is the way they went around doing their plant analysis and response was they really brought in as many ideas as they could, and then they paid everyone to actually do the work. So it wasn't come in to the supply companies, come in and we'll pick your brains and then we'll go off and spend as little money as possible. It's, we're prepared to actually openly work. It's a very Japanese lean processing. We're all working as a team and everyone will have the opportunity to contribute, and time is more important when actually waste is now. Time is now, and what you're wasting now, so maybe bringing in these more lean principles about how you evaluate what waste is, and how you evaluate solving problems in a collaborative fashion now, in an open collaboration platform now. I think that's certainly in terms of solving the problem and getting action, but there's quite a lot of behavioural thinking, procurement issues with procurement teams, behavioural thinking that the challenge needs to be overcome. And the C-suite and the mining companies are talking the talk now, but it hasn't got down to the procurement. So maybe this sort of endorsement of companies who've sent a certain percentage of their staff off to, workshops to learn about opportunities and brainstorm solutions, and, maybe that's one way of changing the culture and the thinking around it.
And look, one of the things I think CEEC has been really effective at is because of things like the simple visual tools in energy curves, and because of the very clear messaging around why comminution is key to footprint and financials, it has the ability to break through those silos and be an effective communication, focus.
Yeah, it's independent.
And perhaps what we need to be doing,
completely independent.
That's right. And having ESG people in the room, along with comminution, along with financial, along with procurement and the decision makers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see where we go to next. So looking to the future, Elizabeth, looking forward, what do you think is in store for the mining industry in the next 10 years in terms of the drivers of change, the challenges, but the opportunities?
Well, I think, from where I'm sitting, social license to operate is going to be the greatest driver for change. And we're seeing that happen already. We're seeing that on the mining company boards and also the METS company boards, where investors are asking questions of the boards about how they're approaching their environmental footprint and other sort of social license issues. So that's a pretty exciting change for the mining industry. I think, particularly in the gold industry is not used to having customers. They just sell the gold into the London Metal Exchange. And I think having to sort of open up to those discussions will change the way they think about where they work. And I think it already has. I think there's been incredible change and incredible cultural change. And the mining companies are much more changing their view of how do we partner? How do we partner with suppliers? How do we partner with our communities? How do we create greater benefit for everybody? And there is greater benefit to be achieved. I'm absolutely sure of that. So very excited to see that happen. I believe that change has happened very much at the top end of the organisation. I think we need to see that flow through culturally to the sort of more operational ends of the organisation, who are still, I suppose, aren't facing those same challenges yet. So that's going to be a pretty exciting change for the industry going forward. So, what's not to like about, mining being seen and regarded as an important source of income, an important source of relationships for the...
We need to be a part of that flow through to operational procurement people, to people in the ESG team, so that they're making better informed decisions on the ground that reflect what their leaders want, what changes they might invest in their day-to-day decisions and up to their big CapEx decisions, not just economic, but making sure that those risks and responsibilities on the social and environmental front are actually taken into account. This is an exciting time, isn't it, Elizabeth?
Oh, look, it's super exciting to hear what the leaders in the mining industry are talking about, and their passion for change, and the fact that they see that cultural change is essential, and the role of mining in society, gets a whole new sort of do-over, and also, particularly around the renewable energy and the net zero thinking. What is possible for mining in the future? There's so much that's possible. And the great thing about the mining industry and the METS industry is there's so many smart people in it, and if they're given the right goals and the right tools and the funding, I think we can create change incredibly quickly.
That's fantastic. Very great to hear that optimism. I am an eternal optimist, Elizabeth. Maybe it's because I'm a geologist.
Yes, unfortunately I am too.
but it's because it's from the optimists and the visionaries, and the people who come in with different cultural perspectives, like you're talking about, the Japanese lean approach that has a completely different way of thinking, that we're going to get those breakthroughs. So that collaboration and that collective good is actually one of the ways that we're going to overcome those challenges, I'm sure. Now we're going to talk about some of your takeaway points, and we're going to talk about, well, what are your views? What would be the one or two things you would say that's a call to action for industry leaders and professionals in the mining industry around what CEEC's trying to do?
Well, I think obviously the call to action firstly is that society is asking us to change. They want us to change, and we can change, and we have the opportunity to change, and we have the intention to change. So that is a massive call to action in terms of reducing energy consumed in comminution as one of the core energy consuming parts of the mining industry. I think that's absolutely call to action, that we've got so many different pathways to achieve that, whether it's new technology, whether it's new flow sheets, whether it's just looking at eliminating waste right the way from pit to port, and sharing. If we want to do that faster, then we have to share the benefit amongst the collaborators. You can't just, I don't believe that to get that in an accelerated fashion, that mining companies or METS companies can look to just take all that benefit for themselves. We have to work together. We have to share the opportunities. We have to share the opportunities with the communities that we work with and make mining more meaningful for them and more of a positive experience for them, because we have seen that happen, and we've seen the benefit that mining can bring to communities, whether through increased any positive things that mining can do. And, addressing this challenge of energy consumption is one piece of the puzzle that we have that really, is going to be important to driving change.
Fantastic, beautifully said. So we're at a time where social licence and ESG are seen as absolutely vital by mining leaders and by community alike. And really what you're saying is it's a sign of good leadership when a leader is empowering their people to share the knowledge that they've gained through organisations like CEEC, and that will help us all gain trust from the community, from shareholders, and also help us accelerate the solutions within our companies quicker.
That's exactly right. And, CEEC is an absolutely unique organisation that has been established for the benefit of the mining industry and the related supply industry, for the benefit of the global community. And, what an amazing outcome, if this not-for-profit organisation with good intentions can actually deliver, and has delivered, in my opinion, ground-level outcomes for the mining industry.
Thanks, Elizabeth. That's fantastic. I just want to thank Elizabeth for her absolute vision and incredible time, thousands of hours, and such a vision for forming CEEC. Words can't express our thanks from the CEEC board today, the CEEC sponsors and the network today, but also from industry. So thank you very much, Elizabeth, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Alison. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm so excited to see where CEEC is and the potential future for this organisation.